Hey guys, Enkiri here, and today I want to talk a little bit about the very sad tragedy that occurred recently with bodybuilder Justyn Vicky. Now, out of respect for Justyn, I'm not going to show the actual footage of the accident occurring here, so if that's what you're looking for, this is not the right video for you. Instead, what I want to do here today is discuss a couple of the things that went wrong, and I will show the applicable footage there, but discuss a couple of the things that went wrong that caused this tragedy to happen, as well as just briefly touch on weight room safety in general, specifically when squatting heavy weights, because as sad as this tragedy was, the even sadder fact is that it was 100% preventable. So the goal here with this video today is to arm all of you guys with the knowledge needed to make sure that something totally preventable like this accident does not happen again. Now, I want to preface by saying that I don't have the context here. I don't follow Justyn, and I had never heard of him before this accident, so I don't know how he typically trained. I don't know if this weight was too heavy for him or anything like that, or if he had no business attempting to even lift a weight like this. But even disregarding any applicable context like that, this tragedy is still something that should not and would not have happened if proper safety measures had been taken and put into place. Now, if somebody wants to YOLO a heavy squat attempt every now and then, that's really their prerogative. I'm not going to tell anyone who I don't coach how to train themselves or how to live their lives. But when dealing with life-threatening weights, everyone should take care to make sure that proper safety mechanisms are in place before doing so, so that something like this does not happen, and that the worst that can happen is a blown joint or a torn muscle or something to that effect, and not a tragic death like what happened here. So just to quickly rehash in case you aren't aware, Justyn, who was obviously a very experienced lifter, just from a cursory look at his Instagram page, that's very obvious. He was very experienced, but he was attempting a heavy squat very recently. I think it was just a few days ago, and he did so outside of the safety of the squat rack, and he opted to use spotters, human spotters, instead. And ultimately, after Justyn had missed the squat, the presence of the spotters caused the barbell to fall forward onto his neck rather than backwards onto the floor, which ended up breaking his neck and was an injury that proved to be fatal. And like I said, this is such a sad thing, and it was 100% preventable. It should not have happened. Now, for whatever reason, squatting outside the safeties, outside of the squat rack, is a pretty common thing. People do it all the time. People are forced to do it in powerlifting meets. Olympic weightlifters do it as a matter of course. I've done it myself, so it is commonplace, right? But that does not make it right. If Justyn had been situated safely inside the squat rack with the safeties set at an appropriate height, then this tragedy would not have occurred. Point blank. The safeties would have caught the weight before it could crush him like it did. Now, this doesn't mean that squatting with the safeties in place makes you invincible. Muscles can still tear, joints can still get damaged, and I've even seen a guy take his hand off of the bar and get it crushed between the weight and the safety pin. And that sucks, but you shouldn't be removing your hand from the bar anyway, and getting a crushed hand is still better than dying. So first and foremost, everyone should squat inside the safety of the cage with the safety pins set at an appropriate height every single time they squat. No exceptions. If you do this, you will not become the victim of a preventable tragedy like this, because you cannot be crushed by the bar. That is literally the reason why these safety measures were invented, to prevent you from being crushed. There is never a good reason not to take advantage of this safety feature. We deal with life-threatening weights every single time we step foot into the gym. So along with that, we should use these life-saving protocols every single time we're there as well. Do not allow yourself to become complacent in the weight room when it comes to safety. It only takes once to cause something tragic like this to happen, and this sad, sad tragedy should serve as a cautionary tale and a reminder to all of us to take weight room safety very, very seriously at all times. Another point that's very important to talk about here is that you do not need spotters when squatting. You do not need human spotters. In fact, human spotters often make things more dangerous than anything else. As occurred here, the presence of the spotters prevented Justyn from dumping the bar behind him, which would have likely prevented the injury from occurring, or at least from being as catastrophic as it was. If there were no spotters, then Justyn would have had the opportunity to toss the bar behind him and move out or jump out from underneath of it. This is a technique called bailing, and it is incredibly commonplace in Olympic weightlifting, where squatting outside of the squat rack is very, very common. That said, as sad as it is that the presence of the spotters is likely what precipitated this tragedy, I still would not recommend for anyone to practice solo squatting with the intent of bailing on any missed lifts. The reason for this is that even the most skilled, confident, and experienced bailer can still become the victim of a tragic squat accident, because there are simply unpredictable things that occur every now and then when you are underneath of a heavy barbell. This primarily includes things like muscle tears and tendon ruptures. Obviously, no one ever goes into a set with the intent to tear a muscle, but sometimes injuries just happen. No matter how experienced you are at bailing out of a squat, a torn quad or a strained erector or a blown knee can render that act an impossibility. Thus, instead of bailing, you can end up being crushed by the bar. Instead of a minorly torn muscle, you can end up with multiple ruptured tendons, severe muscle tears, wrecked joints, or potentially even worse, simply because you had no means of safely getting out from under the barbell. Spotters tend to not be overly helpful in these types of situations either, because things happen too quickly and they simply cannot react in time, or they do not react appropriately when they do react. The weight falls on the lifter and more damage is done than what should have been done. And this sort of thing happens all the time in powerlifting. The spotting at IPF Worlds a few years ago, I can't remember the exact year that it was, maybe it was 2014, 2015, something like that, but it was deplorable. And many lifters were put in great danger because of it. There was that famous bodybuilder in the 90s who destroyed both of his knees and basically his legs as well by squatting outside of the rack. What likely would have been a minor muscle tear or maybe a moderate muscle tear resulted in much more damage, because without safety pins in place, the weight simply has to keep falling on top of you. Brandon Lilly suffered severe damage to his knees in a powerlifting competition a few years ago because of a bang-bang type injury that caused the weight to fall and take him all the way to the ground. Meanwhile, soft tissue structures are becoming progressively more and more damaged with each inch that you fall unimpeded, and the spotters simply cannot react to prevent these types of things. But if there were safety pins in place, the damage would be much less severe. And you could go on and on for days with examples like this, but the point is, the only surefire, fail-safe way to ensure that damage is kept to a minimum in the event of a catastrophe under the barbell is to use safety pins. Spotters do not help, and squatting free solo is simply a reckless, unnecessary risk to take. To be honest, at this point, it is almost negligent that powerlifting refuses to do away with human spotters and use safety arms instead. One thing you could do is even measure depth heights off of pins when lifters get their rack heights measured, and then do pin squats instead of free squats. You would squat down to the pins, you would wait for the squat command just like a bench press, and then you would stand up to lockout and wait for the rack command. No more need for spotters, no more need for depth judges, just a front judge who makes sure that the rack command and the start command and the squat command are adhered to. I'm getting a little bit off topic now, but it all ties back into lifter safety and weight room safety. I really, really hate seeing stuff like this. I hate when people send me stuff like this because it makes me sad But honestly, it also kind of makes me more mad than anything else, because this should not have happened. It should not have happened, and preventing it was as easy as standing inside of a squat rack and placing some metal pins underneath of you to catch the bar. Squatting without safeties is literally like free solo climbing. Most of the time, everything goes fine. But every now and then, a catastrophic, tragic, and highly avoidable accident occurs. As a community, we should look out for each other by actively discouraging this type of behavior, and instead we should teach people that no matter how experienced you are, no matter how experienced you become, no matter how good that you are, accidents can still happen to anyone. But tragedy can be prevented when proper safety measures are taken. So those measures should be taken every single time we step into the weight room. Now, if you are going to comment on this video here, please be respectful in general. Please be respectful to Justyn. I will not tolerate anything that is out of line or disrespectful. I will remove the comment and I will ban anybody who acts that way. This was a highly preventable tragedy. It's very sad, and we should take the time to learn from it in a respectful manner so that it does not happen to anyone else. Please be safe, guys.